This video is a property of Crime Prime Studio.
This is Theodore Robert Bundy.
For the record, you are guilty of killing many women and girls.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
A 42-year-old serial murderer who confessed to 30 killings committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978. His maternal grandparents brought him up. Bundy eventually discovered his true parentage after a cousin showed him his birth certificate and called him a bastard. In interviews, Ted Bundy describes his grandfather Samuel Cowell as racist, a wife and dog beater, who also swung neighborhood cats by their tails. Bundy's only significant hobby was downhill skiing, which he pursued enthusiastically with stolen equipment and forged lift tickets. He was arrested in high school at least twice on suspicion of burglary and motor vehicle theft. At 18 years of age, the details of these incidents on his criminal record got removed. Between 1974 and 1978, more than 30 unsolved crimes of kidnapping, rape, and murder cases of several young women and girls was unsolved. On Friday, November 8, 1974, a young Utah native, Carol Durant, drove to the mall and entered a bookstore. Soon after,
A man approached me. I think he introduced himself as being a police officer, and his name was Officer Roseland. He said, "Is your license plate number?" And he read off my license plate number. I said, "Yes, that's my license plate number." And he said, "We caught someone trying to break into your car." He asked me if I could go out to the car with him and see if anything had been taken. We got out to my car and I opened the door and I could see nothing was missing.
the man smelled like alcohol, and he was driving a Volkswagen Bug rather than an official patrol car. However, he wore a legitimate badge, making her have no doubts about him. Carol Durant got into his car, and they drove away. She realized something was wrong when he pulled over near an elementary school. She observed the passenger side door lacked an easily accessible handle. Bundy shackled one of her wrists, brought out a gun, and threatened to shoot her. After a struggle, she eventually fought him and escaped. Before dawn on August 16, 1975, near Granger, a Salt Lake City suburb, Bundy was driving on a deserted road when Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward saw him.
I gave chase on the Volkswagen, and this went for several blocks through stop signs. Through the subdivision 40, 45, through 2 stop signs, and then out onto a main road where the vehicle pulled over and stopped in an abandoned gas station.
Upon his arrest, Officer Bob Hayward searched his car and noticed that the front passenger seat had been removed and placed on the rear seats. He also discovered a ski mask, a pantyhose mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, a coil of rope, an ice pick, and other objects that he initially mistook for burglary gear. Bundy explained that the ski mask was for skiing, found the handcuffs in a dumpster, and the rest were essential home items. Then, Officer Bob Hayward questioned what Bundy was about, and he attested that he went to the Valley View Drive-In Theater to see a movie. Officer Bob Hayward took Bundy to the county jail for booking. Bob Hayward informed his brother, Salt Lake County Sheriff Pete Hayward, about the unusual arrest. Deputy Ben Forbes recalled getting the name Theodore Bundy and his photograph from police in Washington state as a potential suspect in their common problem of serially killed young women during a discussion at the weekly sheriff's office meeting the following Tuesday. The witness composite from the Lake Sammamish double abduction and the description of the suspect's Volkswagen seems to match their recent finding. These conditions were like Carol Durant's attempted kidnapping in the previous fall in relation to Detective Jerry Thompson's findings. Police summoned Durant to the station to select Bundy from a lineup, which she did even though Bundy had substantially modified his physical appearance before appearing, according to detectives. Bundy was charged with kidnapping and sentenced to 1 to 15 years in Utah State Prison by a judge in 1976. He was then extradited to Colorado to face murder charges. Bundy's first conviction triggered a chain of events that included jail escapes and many more attacks and murders, eventually linking Bundy to disappearances and murders in multiple states and culminating in his death sentence in 1979. In January 1989, he was executed. This is Samuel Little, an 80-year-old serial murderer.
I get no kicked out of shit.
All right. So everything was done by manual strangulation. Did you ever use like a belt or a cloth or
No
anything?
garrots and all that, no.
No ligatures at all?
My hands.
Just your hands?
And without that, I wouldn't want to do it.
Born in Reynolds, Georgia, USA. He is regarded as America's most prolific serial killer, who admitted to killing 93 women between 1970 and 2005. On June 7, 1940, in Reynolds, Georgia, Samuel Little was born as Samuel McDowell to 16-year-old prostitute Bessie Mae Little and 19-year-old client Paul McDowell. Little's family relocated to Lorain, Ohio, shortly after his birth, where he was raised by his grandmother. He went to Hawthorne Junior High School, where he struggled with discipline and academic achievement. He began having erotic fantasies about strangling women as a toddler, according to his story, after seeing his kindergarten teacher touch her neck. As a teenager, he collected true crime magazines featuring women being choked. Little was detained at a juvenile detention facility in 1956 after being convicted of breaking and entering a property in Omaha, Nebraska. Little relocated to Florida to live with his mother in the late 1960s, working as a cemetery worker and an ambulance attendant at various periods, by his own account. He then began traveling more widely and had more run-ins with the law, being arrested in 8 states for offenses such as DUI, fraud, shoplifting, solicitation, armed robbery, serious assault, and rape. Little was sentenced to 3 years in jail in 1961 for breaking into a Lorain furniture business. He was released in 1964. He had been arrested 26 times in 11 states by 1975 for offenses such as theft, violence, attempted rape, fraud, and attacks on government officials. Little was apprehended in Pascagoula, Mississippi, in 1982, and accused of the murder of Melinda Rose LaPree, a 22-year-old African-American woman, who had gone missing in September 1982. A grand jury decided not to charge him with her murder. However, while under investigation, Little was extradited to Florida and tried for the murder of Patricia Ann Mount, a 26-year-old woman whose body was discovered in September 1982. In court, prosecution witnesses identified Little as someone who spent time with Mount the night before her abduction. Little was acquitted in January 1984 due to a distrust of witness testimony. Little relocated to California, where he lived in the San Diego area. He was arrested in October 1984 for kidnapping, beating, and strangling Lori Barros, a 22-year-old woman who survived. 1 month later, authorities discovered him in the back seat of his car with an unconscious lady who had also been battered and strangled, in the same area as the attempted murder of Barros. Little was sentenced to 2.5 years in jail for both offenses. When he was released in February 1987, he moved to Los Angeles and committed at least 10 more murders. Little was arrested on September 5, 2012, at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky, and extradited to California to face a narcotics charge, after which authorities used DNA testing to establish that he was involved in the murders of Carol Eileen Elford, who was murdered on July 13, 1987, Guadalupe Duarte Apodaca, who was murdered on September 3, 1987, and Audrey Nelson Everett, who was murdered on August 14, 1989. All 3 ladies were murdered and later discovered on Los Angeles streets. On January 7, 2013, he was extradited to Los Angeles and charged. A few months later, authorities announced that Little was being probed for his possible involvement in 36 homicides perpetrated in the 1980s that had previously gone unreported. The Lorain murder case was reopened because of the new conditions in Mississippi. Little was tested for involvement in 93 women's killings across the United States. In September 2014, Little was tried for the murders of Elford, Nelson, and Apodaca. The prosecution produced DNA evidence as well as testimony from witnesses who were assaulted by the accused at various points during his criminal career. Little was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on September 25, 2014. Little was serving a sentence at the California State Prison, Los Angeles County, at the time of his death.
This video was brought to you by Crime Prime Studio. Subscribe for part 2.